The short answer is, nobody knows. That's the honest and frustrating truth of it. The man who murdered the Miyazawa family vanished. He left behind a ghost made of DNA, fingerprints, and clothes, but he himself disappeared into the Tokyo night. For over 2 decades, this ghost has haunted Japanese investigators. It's one of the most baffling and disturbing crimes in the country's modern history. We have more clues than almost any other unsolved case, yet we are no closer to having a name. The question isn't just who did it, but how someone could leave so much of themselves behind and never be found. It was the end of the year 2000. A new millennium had just begun. In a quiet, comfortable neighborhood in Setagaya, Tokyo, the Miyazawa family was getting ready to welcome the new year. Their house was right next to a park, Soshigaya Park. It was a nice place to raise a family. Mikio Miyazawa was 44. He worked for a consulting firm. He was a smart man, a graduate of the prestigious University of Tokyo. His wife Yasuko was 41. She ran a juku, a private cram school, out of their home. They had 2 children. Their daughter Nina was 8 years old. Their son Rei was 6. He had a learning disability and was a sweet, gentle boy. They were a normal family. They had plans. They had a life. On the morning of December 31st, Yasuko's mother, Haruko, tried to call them. The phone just rang and rang. It was strange. She knew they were supposed to be visiting her family that day. She tried again. Nothing. Something felt wrong. She decided to go to their house. She had a key. When she arrived, everything looked normal from the outside. The lights were on. But when she used her key, she couldn't open the door. It was still latched from the inside. She called out for them. Silence. Now she was truly worried. She went around the house trying to find another way in. Finally, she managed to get inside. What she found was a nightmare. Mikio was at the bottom of the stairs on the first floor. He had been stabbed multiple times. He had fought back, fought hard for his family, but he was dead. Upstairs in the loft, she found her daughter and granddaughter. Yasuko and Nina were in their beds. They had been stabbed over and over, with a horrifying, brutal violence. Little Rei was found in his own bed. He had been strangled. He was the first to be killed, likely in his sleep. The police were called. The scene was sealed. The investigation began, and what they discovered was not the work of a professional. It was messy, bizarre, and filled with contradictions. The killer was an amateur, and he had been in no hurry to leave. In fact, he stayed in the house for hours after he killed the entire family. First, the entry. The killer didn't break down a door. He climbed up a tree next to the house, scaled the wall, and squeezed through a small open window in the second-floor bathroom. Now, it was a tight fit. He was slim. Once inside, he made his way to Rei's room. It seems he killed the boy first, quietly, by strangulation. Mikio must have heard something. He came up the stairs to investigate. That's where the killer met him. The two of them fought. The fight was violent. The killer had brought his own knife, a sentoku knife, a common Japanese kitchen knife. But during the struggle with Mikio, the blade broke. The handle was left at the scene. Even with a broken weapon, the killer managed to overpower Mikio, stabbing him repeatedly. Mikio fought for his life. His defensive wounds were severe, but he died there at the foot of the stairs. The killer was injured. He had cut his own hand during the fight. Now, weaponless and wounded, he didn't flee. He went to the kitchen. He found another knife, a long, sharp sashimi knife from the Miyazawa's own knife block. With this new weapon, he went upstairs to the loft, where Yasuko and Nina were sleeping. He attacked them with a frenzy that police could only describe as pure rage. The attack was so vicious, it was clear this was more than just silencing witnesses. And then, with the entire family dead, the killer did the strangest things. He didn't run, he stayed. He stayed for hours. The police estimate he could have been in the house for anywhere from 2 to 10 hours. He walked around the house, leaving his bloody footprints everywhere. He used the family's first aid kit to bandage his injured hand. He did a clumsy job of it, using multiple bandages and tape. He went to the fridge. He took out 4 containers of ice cream. He ate them, apparently with his hands, leaving the empty cups on the floor. He drank barley tea from the fridge. He took a nap on the living room sofa. He went into the bathroom and used the toilet. This was a critical mistake. He didn't flush. The police were able to find evidence of what he had eaten the day before: string beans and sesame seeds. More importantly, he left his feces in the toilet bowl, a rich source of DNA. He used the family's computer. He logged on twice. The first time was around 1:18 a.m. The second was around 10:05 a.m., long after the sun had come up. The family's mouse was an old rollerball type, not an optical one, which meant it was harder to use. The killer struggled with it. He tried to buy tickets for a theater show. He visited the website of Mikio's company. He bookmarked a few pages. He just browsed the internet in a house full of people he had just murdered. He went through the family's things, he opened drawers, he scattered papers on the floor. But he didn't seem to be looking for anything specific. He took some money, about 150,000 yen, around $1,500, but left behind a much larger sum that was in plain sight. It wasn't a robbery for money. If it was a very bad one. Then he got changed. He took off his own clothes, which were covered in blood. He folded them neatly and left them on the sofa. He put on clothes belonging to Mikio. They didn't fit him well. The jacket was too big. He left his own clothes behind, as if they were a gift. And with that, he walked out the front door, into the morning light of December 31st, and was never seen again. The crime scene was an investigator's dream and nightmare all at once. The killer had left behind a mountain of physical evidence. More than a dozen of his fingerprints were found. His blood was there from the wounds on his hand. His DNA was everywhere. His clothes were there. His weapon was there. The contents of his fanny pack were there. It seemed like an open and shut case. All they had to do was run the prints and the DNA, find a match, and arrest the guy. But nothing matched. His fingerprints were not in any police database in Japan or internationally. His DNA was not on file anywhere. It was the DNA of a ghost. But that DNA told a very strange and specific story. When they analyzed his DNA, they found he had a blood type A standard stuff. But then they looked deeper at his mitochondrial DNA, which traces the maternal line. It belonged to a haplogroup common in East Asia, particularly in China, Korea, and Japan. One analysis suggested his mother's lineage came from a group found on the Mediterranean coast of Europe, or perhaps among the Adyghe people of the Caucasus region. This was an unusual but not impossible combination. The truly strange part came from his Y chromosome DNA, which traces the paternal line. It belonged to a haplogroup common among European men. So, the killer had an Asian mother and a father of European descent. This mix was not common in Japan at the time. It narrowed down the search, but it also widened it to the entire world. The police had a profile. They were looking for a young man. Based on the clothes he left behind, he was about 170 centimeters tall, 5 feet 7 inches, and had a slim build. He was right-handed, he was injured, he had mixed Asian and European ancestry, and he was somewhere out there. The investigation became one of the largest in Japanese history. Over 246,000 officers have worked on the case. They have chased down over 12,500 tips from the public. They have knocked on tens of thousands of doors. They have collected DNA samples from countless individuals, and they have found nothing. Let's look at the evidence he left behind. It's so specific, it's maddening. The clothes. He left a black Uniqlo AirTech jacket, size large. Police tracked its sale. Over 82,000 were sold. But this specific one was sold in a limited number of stores. They left a sweatshirt. It was a cheap gray long-sleeve sweatshirt. It had been washed many times, so it was faded. The brand was MX, sold by a company called Rag Machine. Only 130 of these sweatshirts were ever made. Police tracked down the purchase records for 10 of them. The other 120 were sold for cash. Their buyers lost to time. He left his hat. A cheap bucket hat, found near the house. And he left his shoes. Or at least the impression of his shoes. He wore a pair of Slazenger sneakers, a British brand, but this particular model was not sold in Japan. It was made and sold in South Korea. The size was 28 centimeters, which is about a size 10.5 in the US. He also left a fanny pack or a hip bag. Inside it was a small amount of sand. Police analyzed the sand. It wasn't from Japan. Some of the minerals matched sand from the Edwards Air Force Base area in Southern California. Other particles matched sand from the area around Las Vegas, Nevada. How did sand from the American desert get into a killer's bag in Tokyo? It was another bizarre, almost surreal clue. The knife he brought with him was a brand called Seki Magoroku. A very common, cheap knife you could buy anywhere in Japan. Police couldn't trace it. So you have this puzzle. A killer with European and Asian ancestry, wearing a cheap Japanese jacket and sweatshirt, wearing Korean-made shoes not sold in Japan, carrying a bag with sand from American military-adjacent areas. It pointed in a dozen different directions at once. Over the years, several major theories have taken shape. The first, and most obvious, is the botched burglary. The killer broke in to steal money. The family woke up, and he panicked. He killed them all to silence them. This explains the entry point and the initial goal. But it doesn't explain his behavior afterward. Why stay for hours? Why eat ice cream and use the computer? Why take a nap? Why leave behind a large amount of cash? Burglars who panic usually run. This killer lingered. His actions were not those of a man in a hurry to escape. They were calm, methodical, almost like he felt at home. The second theory is a grudge killing. Someone had a deep personal hatred for the Miyazawa family. This would explain the extreme violence, especially against Yasuko and Nina. It was overkill, but the family was well-liked. They had no known enemies. Police looked into every aspect of their lives. Mikio's work, Yasuko's cram school, even arguments between neighbors, they found nothing. No one had a motive to want this family dead, let alone in such a brutal way. The third theory, and one that police have pursued heavily, is the Korean connection. The shoes were made in Korea. The killer's DNA had an East Asian component. And there was a strange incident before the murders. The Soshigaya Park next to the Miyazawa's house was a popular spot for skateboarders. Mikio had gotten into arguments with some of them over noise late at night. Some of these skateboarders were reportedly of Korean descent. Could one of them have held a grudge? Could the murder have been revenge for a perceived insult? This theory has some legs. It would explain the youthful profile of the killer, it would explain the shoes. The police investigated this angle intensely. They took DNA samples from countless people in the local community and those with ties to Korea. They even collaborated with South Korean police, but they never found a match. And it still doesn't explain the sand from the Nevada desert. Another theory points to a military connection. The sand from the area of an American Air Force base is a strong clue. Could the killer have been a U.S. serviceman, or someone with a connection to the U.S. military? There are several U.S. bases in the Tokyo area. The mixed DNA would fit this profile. Perhaps he was the child of a serviceman and a local woman. This is a plausible idea. But again, investigations into personnel at the bases turned up nothing, and it would be a huge leap to go from having sand in a bag to being a military member. He could have just visited the US or known someone who did. Then there are the more fringe theories, that he was a hired hitman, but his behavior was too sloppy. A professional would not have left so much evidence. He would not have stayed for hours. He would not have used the family's first aid kit. That he was a mentally unstable person who chose the house at random. This is possible. It would explain the bizarre post-murder behavior. But the way he entered the house suggests some level of planning. It wasn't a random act of insanity, it was targeted, at least in the sense that he chose that specific house to enter. The police have tried everything. They built an exact replica of the Miyazawa house to help investigators visualize the crime. They have released every detail of the killer's clothing to the public, hoping someone somewhere will remember a person who suddenly stopped wearing that specific outfit after the year 2000. They have put up a massive 20 million yen reward for information, one of the largest in Japanese history. Every year, on the anniversary of the murders, the Tokyo Metropolitan Police hold a memorial event near the house. They hand out flyers, they ask the public to think back. Did you know a young man who fit this description? Did he have an injury on his hand around New Year's in 2000? Did he suddenly leave the area? The house itself stood for years, a silent monument to the crime. The family's relatives maintained it, keeping it exactly as it was, hoping the killer might one day return to the scene. But he never did. The house was finally demolished in 2019. The land is now an empty lot, surrounded by a fence. As technology has advanced, so have the police's methods. In recent years, they have used the killer's DNA to create a more detailed picture of him. This is called DNA phenotyping. It can predict physical traits. Based on the DNA, they believe the killer had black hair, brown eyes, and a skin tone somewhere between dark and intermediate. They believe he was between 15 and 20 years old at the time of the crime. This means he would be in his late 30s or early 40s today. This new information paints a clearer picture, but it's still just a sketch. A man in his 40s of mixed heritage who, as a teenager, committed one of the most brutal crimes in Japanese history and then simply vanished. So, who was he? Let's try to put the pieces together into a person. He was young, athletic enough to climb a tree and get through a small window. He was slim. He was not a professional killer. He was either very callous or mentally detached to be able to stay in the house for hours after what he did. His actions, eating ice cream, surfing the web, taking a nap, suggest a profound lack of remorse or a complete disconnect from reality. It's almost childlike. Maybe the botched burglary theory is the closest to the truth, but with a twist. Maybe he was a young, broke kid. He breaks in, thinking the house is empty. He's not there to hurt anyone, just to get some cash. He kills Ray by mistake, or in a panic. Mikio confronts him. The fight happens. He's injured, bleeding, and now he's killed someone. He knows he can't go back. So, he kills the rest of the family to eliminate witnesses. But what happens next is the key. He's a teenager, he's just committed a horrific act of violence. He's wounded, he's in shock, his adrenaline is gone, he's just a scared kid. So what does he do? He reverts to familiar, comforting behaviors. He eats junk food. He sits on a sofa, he goes online, he's not a cold, calculating monster. He's a confused, terrified young man who has just crossed a line from which there is no return. He doesn't know what to do next, so he just exists. For a few hours, he lives in the house of the people he killed, because he has nowhere else to go. His own life is over too. In this scenario, his neat folding of the clothes isn't the act of a psychopath. It's a habit, something his mother taught him, an automatic action in a moment of utter chaos. And then, as the sun comes up, he realizes he has to leave. He puts on some of the dead man's clothes and walks out into the world. Maybe he left Japan. With his mixed heritage, he might have had a passport from another country. Maybe he went back to Korea or to the US or somewhere in Europe. Or maybe he's still in Japan. Maybe he's a husband now, a father, a regular salaryman who works in an office in Tokyo. Maybe he passes by the Setagaya Park every day on his way to work. The police have a database with 13 million DNA profiles. His is not among them. He has never been arrested for another crime. It seems the Setagaya family murder was his first, and perhaps his last, act of serious violence. He learned his lesson. He learned to control his rage. He learned to live with the ghosts of a man, a woman, and 2 small children. The case remains a deep wound in the Japanese psyche. Japan is a country with a very low crime rate. A crime this brutal, this random, and this unsolved is profoundly unsettling. It suggests that behind the safe, orderly facade of society, something like this can happen. A monster can slip in through a bathroom window in the middle of the night and destroy a family and then melt away, leaving only questions behind. The lead investigator who was first on the scene is now retired, but he still visits the family's graves. He still thinks about the case every single day. He, like everyone else, is haunted by the ghost. The ghost who ate ice cream. The ghost who left his clothes folded neatly. The ghost who is now a middle-aged man, living a life he stole from 4 people on a cold December night at the turn of the millennium. We don't know his name, we don't know where he is, we only know what he did. And we know that he is still out there. The file on the Setagaya family slaying remains open. It sits on a desk in a Tokyo police station, waiting for the one phone call, the one DNA match, the one deathbed confession that will finally give the ghost a name and the Miyazawa family some semblance of justice. But after all this time, the trail is colder than the winter night he committed his crime. The simple, horrible answer remains the same. Nobody knows who he is.